Senator Carson, please. Ready? No, hold on just a second. Hold on.
What day is this? April 9th. April 9th? Yeah. Thank you. It's a sheet? Yeah. Name? Elizabeth. So Mike must be on this side. Yes. His mom must be really excited. Oh, very excited. Good. Oh, yeah. He's the only child. That is great. So much fun. Oh, yeah. Summertime. Exactly. It takes hold and they never appear. I mean, she would be so, yeah, just a good year. Yeah, we're great. Hold on. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We can wear you on after a while. So, but yeah, just make sure you get
I saw it. I didn't know it's not.
No. Except the big one. Maybe, and I wanted to try to show you. I'll be lucky if I can also get out of here. I'll put it on again.
I'll just show the one on the language that's at the point.
Yeah. Just about halfway full, just in case. I give it a couple more.
Yep, good idea. If I get a ticket here,
I turned the last one, that still hasn't worked out.
Chairman vote.
Another meeting on the
That one I have.
no, I don't have an amendment, I just have a bill. I'm working on another amendment.
Okay, we're going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 318 and call the prime sponsor, Senator Carson, to introduce a piece of legislation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Sharon Carson, and I have the pleasure and the distinction of representing Senate District 14, comprising the towns of Auburn, Londonderry, and Hudson. And I have before you this morning for your consideration Senate Bill 318 FN, relative to eligibility to vote, voter registration, and verifying identity of voters. This bill does makes a number of changes to existing law. The first is requires that the Secretary of State pay the cost for a picture identification card upon presentation of a voucher to the Division of Motor Vehicles. Secondly, it establishes that a claim of domicile for voting purposes shall be conclusive of residence for all other legal purposes. Third, requires that voters present a photo identification or execute an identity verification affidavit. And finally, it modifies forms and procedures for voter registration. Mr. Chairman, you've had extensive testimony this morning about voter identification, and I really don't want to repeat myself, except to say that this is an issue that has become increasingly important to the state of New Hampshire. Recently, we've had a very embarrassing incident that had happened, whether you agree that it was appropriate or not. The point is that individuals were able to obtain a ballot in order to vote in this state, and they weren't who they said they were. And so for me, that's just another indication as to why we need to go to a voter identification system. One of the things that you will notice when you look at this bill is that there are some reiterations of the previous photo identification bill that was brought in last year and that was vetoed by the governor. And quite frankly, there was a question of its constitutionality. So what I'd like to do is to walk through the bill and just identify some key pieces of the bill for your consideration. On page 1, we talk about a voucher. And again, this is an idea that we had talked about last year to help individuals that do not have any kind of photo identification to obtain one. And in this instance, they'll receive a voucher. that they can take over to the Division of Motor Vehicles and get a non-driver's license photo identification card at no cost. Now, those funds will be paid out of the Helping America Vote Act, just as previous, like I said, alliterations of this bill had talked about doing. On page 2, beginning on line 10, section 3, when we talk about claim of domicile, what this bill does is it says a person's claim of domicile for voting purposes shall be conclusive of the person's residence for all other legal purposes. If you declare New Hampshire to be your residence when it comes to vote, it will be your legal residence for all other purposes. In section 4, there's a voter registration form for those who are going to register that everyone will have to go through, all new registrants and same-day registrants, to fill out. And again, it is referring to the fact that you have to be domiciled in the town or the city in which you are registering to vote. If you go on to page 3 and a section of that voter registration form, line 34, that a person can only claim one state and one city or town as his or her domicile at a time. The domicile is that place to which upon temporary absence a person has the intention of returning. By registering or voting today, I am acknowledging that I am not domiciled in any other state or other city or town. I understand that if I am domiciled in another state, city or town, I may be entitled to vote in elections held within that state or city and town. And it goes on to include other provisions that deal with declaring New Hampshire as their domicile. If you go on down to section 5, a qualified voter affidavit, we're well aware of the fact that there are folks out there that don't have a recognized form of identification, being a driver's license. So if they come to the polls and they don't have it, we want people to vote. This is not an attempt to prevent anyone from voting. They can fill out a qualified affidavit voter, a qualified voter affidavit that does not, they have to swear that they are not in possession of any documents necessary to prove their identity, citizenship, and age, and that they are the identical person who they represent themselves to be. If you turn on to page 6, we have a section dealing with voter records. If you go down to line 35, the person entering the voter information of election day residents into the central voter registration database shall cause the records to indicate if the voter executed a domicile affidavit. So that way, the next time that person goes to vote, there's a record that they have voted previously with a domicile affidavit, and that they should have received an affidavit, a voter registration form, not a registration form, a form so they could get an identification card for free. And finally, on page 7, there is there's an issue, section dealing with obtaining the ballot, which talks about having to provide a valid photo identification card issued by the state or federal government. So as you can see, my bill is a little more encompassing than Senator Prescott's, but the goal is still the same. We would like folks to produce some sort of photo identification when they go to vote, and we want to make sure that we know that you're voting in the place that you have declared your residence to be. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Crop tape.